Welcome to the Red Ink Revival Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Norris. We're going to grow your leadership through neuroscience, psychology, and theology. Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 23 of the Red Ink Revival Leadership Podcast. My name's Patrick Norris, and our goal today is to help you lead with a whole heart, a healthy brain, and a soul on fire. I'm so glad you're with us. In today's conversation, you're going to hear from my good friend and tenured pastor, Pastor Phil Munsey. Pastor Phil's been in the ministry for over 44 years. He grew up as a pastor's kid. His siblings are in full-time ministry, and his mom is still leading in ministry today. Pastor Phil became Oral Roberts' pastor in the last years of Oral's life. Today, Pastor Phil is pastor to pastors. He leads as chairman of Joel Osteen's Champions Network, serving over 500 churches. Hold on, because you're going to have a great experience listening to Pastor Phil's heart and love for pastors. Today's episode is titled Leadership Culture and Shepherding Shifts, and our conversation covers everything from modern ideas of leadership, sober assessments of weaknesses, Jesus' principles of shepherding, and stories from Oral Roberts, Robert Schuler, Joel Osteen, and more. You're going to enjoy this inspiring, insightful, and energizing show. But first, I'm so glad to have you with us wherever you get podcasts or in the video version on YouTube. We drop content every week, shooting for Thursdays of the month. If this podcast is adding value to your leadership and life, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to it and like, share, review it. Allow this to be something that gets out into the social media platforms and gets us into higher algorithms in iTunes. It'll make a big difference for us. Also, I'd like to invite you to a Red Ink Revival Driven People, Driven Leaders free webinar. This hour-long training is with inspiring and fresh insights from neuroscience, psychology, and theology to help you grow in wholeheartedness in every sphere of life. Our next free webinar is scheduled for Friday, June 12th at 10 a.m. Central Time. Go to redinkrevival.com today and find the Register Now tab to save your spot. For all my pastor friends, if you'd like to co-host a Driven People, Driven Leader webinar with me, by inviting a group of your pastor colleagues and networks, we'd love to talk. All you have to do is get 5 to 10 or more senior pastors rallied to jump on with you, and we'll create a private showing just for your tribe. Go to redinkrevival.com/pastors to check it all out. Then contact us with your interest. We'll get back with you as quickly as we can to assess your opportunity. And did I say it's free? So go check it out. And while you're there, sign up for our e-newsletter that'll hit your inbox the first of each month with a powerful blog post as well as all of our upcoming events. Go now to sign up. Let's go now to this week's episode number 23 with my friend Phil Munsey as we talk about leadership culture and shepherding shifts. Well, Pastor Phil, it is so awesome, man, to get you to be on the Red Ink Revival Leadership Podcast. What an absolute thrill. Thank you for being on with me today.
Oh, it's a great joy. You know, Patrick, I've known you for many years, and I think I often tell people I was an intern for 40 years in order to do what I'm doing now. And I feel that way about you. I feel like that, you know, you've traveled the world. You've been you are a phenomenal pastor, phenomenal speaker, but I believe what you're doing now is what your whole life has been in preparation for. And the help that you're bringing to pastors and leaders is just so needed, so rare. And I'm honored to be your friend.
Well, you have been one of my biggest cheerleaders, encouraging me to step up into some things that I shared with you in private. And you have been such a joy to my heart, especially with your background, your history, your voice, your experience. So you actually have a fingerprint on the entire Red Ink Revival platform. You wrote a statement about what we are doing, and you said driven leaders ought to know what they're driven by, and I stole it, and that has become the entire mantra that we run with. So I want to say a huge thank you for that. That's absolutely incredible. Well, let's jump in. You are the son of a minister. You grew up in a pastor's home. In your later years of pastoring the church there in Southern California, you were privileged to be Oral Roberts' pastor, the famous Oral Roberts University and healing revivalist. You today are the chairman of the Champions Network with Joel Osteen, serving over 500 churches. You've been very close friends. You have family that are famous leaders that are tenured, that deeply successful and experienced. You today have an assignment to lead leaders, to pastor pastors, and that's part of the reason that I have a relationship with you. You've been so kind and generous with your time and your energy to share with me. But today, I'm so excited to have you here because with all of that background, the wisdom that you have gained along the way is something that I believe every leader needs to be able to access. If you would, just for a minute, go back into your backstory, share a little bit about what it was like to grow up in a pastor's home and some of the benefits to who you are today from those experiences.
Oh, thank you, Patrick. Well, you know, it is a great joy. I always tell people that are PKs, you have Levi genes. And I definitely am honored for that. I'm a strong believer that God determined when we'd be born, where we'd be born, by whom we'd be born through, so that our destiny would match our DNA. And so, you know, I'm very grateful. I was raised, like you said, in a pastor's home, very, very legalistic. So very, very strict, didn't have access to a television, never went to baseball games, any sporting events.
Wow.
We used to say, we don't smoke and we don't chew. There's not much that we can do. We are people, yes, we are. But that discipline and strictness, you know, I'm glad to be away from it, but that was my background. And then all of my siblings are in the ministry. My brother Joe is the only one that isn't paid by the ministry. He has an incredible job as executive, but has a strong ministry. The rest of us have taken on the mantle of my mom and dad. So in spite of the fact that mom and dad had no training, they often blush. My father's gone on to be with the Lord, but my mom also blushes because, you know, they did so many things wrong. But Patrick, you know, the good thing is that God does honor our hearts. And as we start digging into leaders and pastors, the first thing that happens is we get exposed to our weaknesses and what we did wrong. And the wonderful thing about it is that there's so much grace on that. So, yeah. And so I worked with about a dozen churches across the country. So I learned how to follow. And then we started our church, Jeannie and I, in Orange County, California, and it went for about 30 years and impacted a lot of people. I'm near TBN, which I became to be a pastor of the Crouches, which gave me access to over 2,000 interviews,
Wow.
like you're doing, with some of the great leaders and influential people in the world. And so with that developed a lot of relationships, one of them of which, one of the great rewards, of course, I honor my father, a great influencer, Oral Roberts, no doubt. Many years I had with him, and I'll never forget one Sunday when after church he came up to me and said, this is my church. You are my pastor. Now let's go to In-N-Out Burger. I'm buying. You know, I'll never forget that. In the last 6 months of Oral Roberts' life, he said to me, I know my time is short. I love you, Phil. But I have a lot of things in me that I don't want to take to my grave. Do you want them? And of course I said, yes. And so the last 6 months of his life, I tried to spend every day with him and learned so much. Surprisingly, another one of my top 5 would be Robert Schuler. I had an incredible opportunity to be with him. And even though that would be one of my shortest relationships, he had incredible impact. In fact, Patrick, you remind me a lot of Dr. Schuler, because even though a lot of people saw him on Sunday morning as this, you know, phenomenal speaker and positive mental attitude, his book on self-esteem, The New Reformation, which was his doctorate that he wrote on the Lord's Prayer and wholeness, really opened me up to my worldview of God.
Amazing.
And so these people among, like I said, I've done nearly 2,000 interviews, and not anything attributed to me, but certainly I'm honored that God has allowed me to be around some of the greatest leaders in the world, including, I know this may sound like name dropping, but including spending a couple days at the Vatican and having an audience with the Pope. So most of this has come because I've been at the table with somebody else famous, and I just happen to be there.
Which is
But
so amazing.
it gives me a great set of eyes,
Yeah.
and I feel responsible to share what I've seen in helping other people. So that's really the backdrop. Is really hopefully gives me some credibility, not for anything I've earned,
Yeah.
but for the exposure I've been given.
Well, you are a great preacher. You are a wordsmith. You love to take words, put them together in multiple different ways, and create a portability for them. You're also a thinker that in private, when you and I have spent time together, you go places that not many people go. You think about things that not everybody thinks about. There is precision of thought. There's doctrinal acumen to you. And I'm sure that with all of the other influences that have been a part of your life, that have enriched you, that so much of what comes out of you now today has all these facets, and it's beautiful and inspiring. And I know I've always left you feeling better in how I think, challenged in certain ideas, and wanting to navigate deeper into them. You've been in the ministry for over 44 years in that range, and as a full-time bus driver, you're the driving the bus of an organization. You're the point person. When you think of what leadership is, what's it mean to you to be a leader?
Well, I think the greatest and most simple word is influence. I think leadership is all about influence.
Yeah.
And so that though very simplistic is really what leadership is all about. It's about having an understanding of where you're going and then influencing people to help them get there. So in simple terms, that's what I believe. But Patrick, I'm on a big, huge paradigm shift right now, and I know we're going to get there. So I'm going to go ahead and push the pedal to the metal.
Let's do it.
And that is, I'm having some real shifting in my thinking, especially when it comes to pastors. But I also believe, in all leadership, that we need to lean in more to the concept of shepherding.
Come on.
And this is an analogy, a metaphor, a word picture that Jesus, who is the ultimate leader, embraced. And I think in the last decade, we've gotten away from the mindset of a leader is a shepherd. And there is a difference. I mean, it could be semantics, but really a leader, a lot of the leadership material that we've been using in the last decade has been driven by what I would call the culture leadership model of corporate America, which, as we can see, has been somewhat, has left a lot of damage. When you look at leadership, its model hasn't been something of which we should be that impressed with. The top 1% get the wealth. It doesn't really develop leaders as much as it develops followers. Leadership can be divisive. Leadership separates. And so I'm, which I know, your whole ministry is about leadership, but I think we need to relook at everything.
I love
because
it.
I think even when I look at the church, I feel like we've kind of ripped off corporate leadership culture.
Yeah.
We brought it into the church. Pastors have drifted from their shepherding call. They're basically now CEOs. God did not anoint them for that. So they're actually doing something they're not anointed for at the cost of leaving what they were called to do. As a result of that, a lot of consequences, being burned out, not being satisfied. And so I'm on a passion right now to say, let's not forsake leadership. Leadership organizes, makes better everything that we do.
Yeah.
But leadership cannot create an organic movement. Leadership cannot create healthy fellowship.
Wow.
Just the concept of leadership, when you say all the leaders of our church, immediately that splits the church.
Right.
I'm a leader. Evidently, you're not.
Yeah.
And this is the ironic thing about of what we've done to the church culture, and I think to the corporate culture needs to look at this too, and that is that we have divided people, and we've not created community.
Yeah.
So I go to churches every week, and I see them using clever video commercials on get in a small group, but they don't.
Right.
The biggest, most successful churches have single-digit participation in small groups. That is very unnatural because sheep love to herd, and the shepherd is a herder.
Wow.
So something's wrong here when something organic like community becomes a struggle. We need to back off and say something's not right with the way we're approaching how we help people.
Well, let's pump on that well. What is a shepherd? Talk about what's it look like in this passion of actually shepherding an organization or shepherding people. Give us what do you feel like that is coming alive in you?
Well, first of all, I think, there you can draw so much from the analogy of the Lord is our shepherd. So, there's more emphasis about Jesus wanting to be approached as a shepherd than he is a king, and certainly as a quote unquote leader. So one of the most important aspects of the concept of a shepherd is the Bible says that the sheep hear your voice and will follow after you. This, I think, is crucial. Yeah. Because shepherding still, the whole concept of shepherding still, it's what, 5,000 years old, and yet it's still done the same way. So here's a word picture. At night, all of the sheep get into the sheep gate. There's thousands of them. And then as the sun rises, the shepherds rise up and they begin to make a sound. I'm not going to attempt to make the sound, but you can go to YouTube because it sounds a little bit funny. They make this unique sound and their sheep hear their voice and they separate themselves, and another shepherd they will not follow. This becomes so important because pastors are just beating themselves to death trying to lead people when if they could find their voice, their sheep would find them.
Wow. And
this becomes so important because there's so much competition going on right now. The church world, again, having, as it were, kind of ripped off the corporate culture leadership model, we have also taken the baggage of corporate leadership culture. So part of that is I'm a shepherd. And so we lead from our heart, not from our head. Now, the head is the systems. Yeah. The head is the organization. But if you disconnect the head from the heart, you're going to get yourself in trouble. Yeah. This is where we talk to leaders. I ask the question, our culture rewards the driven. Oh, man, if you're driven, you're going to move up the ladder quickly. I want to look under the hood. I want to know what's driving you.
Yeah.
Because if it's coming from a dark place, I know where you're going to end.
Yeah.
Where you're going to end is the numbers will never be big enough. It will never be fast enough.
Yeah.
And you can never compensate success for anything hurting or missing in your heart.
Yeah.
So you're a disaster in the making. You've got the pedal to the metal and you're going somewhere very fast. And we know 1,700 pastors leave the ministry every month. And I can tell you this, there are another 1,700 that have already left in their heart. They're going through the motion, the emotion, because they have drifted from their gift. And as a result of that, they're never going to be replenished.
Yeah.
The big thing now is I need a sabbatical. But if you're just separating, if you just stop working and you don't realign yourself,
Yeah.
you're just rearranging the chairs on the Titanic.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to happen. This is what I love about you, Patrick. I will never forget when we were walking the streets of Kansas City, getting some of those good Kansas City ribs that you're famous for. And when you begin to talk to me about the mind and about how addictions connected to the way the mind thinks and the power of it, it revolutionized my heart because I recognize that that the driven, they get the biggest churches, they get the biggest contracts, they get the biggest titles. But if someone doesn't look under the hood, they're going to have a lot of pain. And that's why I love what you're doing. And I feel like what you're doing is going to become even more and more vital, even if we're facing this coronavirus kind of quarantine. Let me tell you, for a lot of people, this is going to be good for them because they're going to get some rest.
Yeah.
For others, it's going to expose some things.
Yeah.
They haven't taken the time to look deep enough to find. They're going to need some help. They're going to need people like you.
Oh man, just hearing your heart about all that is so sweet to my soul. And again, you've been one of my greatest advocates, and it blows wind into my sail, and I'm incredibly grateful. What you're talking about with the head and heart, in therapeutic circles, we call that integration. The importance of living an integrated life. And when you are disintegrated or dissociative, where you are separating compartments of your life, it will always lead you to slavery or having an oppression in what you're pursuing. But when you are living in the integration, which technically is the biblical term integrity, integrity is nothing more than integration. And so when we talk about integrity, we're not just talking about having discipline not to be immoral. We're talking about living an aligned life. And when we live that kind of integrated life, we are now free to pursue innovations, dreams, possibilities.
Yeah.
But it comes from a place of freedom rather than a driven place of slavery and oppression. So I love all that you are championing and the passion that you have in your heart. I'm so excited to hear more about that. Let's kind of take a deep dive back into the past. I'd love to hear more stories from your interactions with people like Oral Roberts, even what you've learned and taken away in your close relationship with Joel Osteen, Robert Schuler, whoever you want to go to. You're just a man with a wealth of stories, and I want to privilege all of our listeners to that. Can you tee some of those up for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, first of all, Oral Roberts, I think we all now know that if all you know about somebody is through the media, I think we're all aware now that may not be accurate. Yeah. And certainly Oral's high days in the 80s were a season where they didn't have PR and people that could protect you from yourself and how the media could take things. So there's stories out there about Oral that people think, if that's all you know about him, I'm so sorry, because it really doesn't reflect what an incredible man he was. And I did get to meet him and know him and spend hours with him. I guess probably, one of the greatest things about Oral that starting from the end and then kind of reflecting back is when Oral Roberts was transferred over into the Greens, and he gave the leadership of ORU over. And that transition revealed so much about Oral. And I'll never forget it when we were walking around the university, and he built this university with nothing, starting with nothing. And even now it's, 50 years old, and it still got a cutting edge of the modern look to it. He had such an aggressive mind. And but I remember him saying, I said, Oral, this is amazing. what you've done here. And I had never really seen it. And he said, when I said, Oral, this is fantastic what you've done. He said, every man's weight is the same, whether you're raising up children or raising up a university. You just do what God tells you to do. It's no big deal.
Wow.
And I said to him, with all due respect, what you've done is a big deal.
Yeah.
But his mindset was, look, every man has a burden, has a responsibility, has a role to play. And whether it's something that's public or private, you do what God tells you to do. And that's really what it's all about. And that was very powerful for me to hear, because I think that, we are a culture that, I say it this way, fame is a drug shot in vain. Pity those who want it, pray for those who have it. Because if you're not at peace with yourself and you recognize that you have a mission, and if you happen to be in the top 40 where you will be exposed and you will be celebrated, then so be it. But that comes with the price. But I felt that Oral meant it when he said, Bill, whether you're raising children or raising up a university, you do what God tells you. The weight of every man's burden is the same. That was very impactful for me. Because, Patrick, there's 400,000 churches in America. There's only 1,700 mega churches. The average church is less than 100, and 65% of them are bivocational. And yet, of the 40 million people that will attend church, they're carrying the greatest weight.
Wow.
Less than 1 million people go to mega churches.
Wow.
So that means 39 million are having to be taken care of by true shepherds.
Yeah.
If these shepherds feel that unless they build a university, unless they're on television, unless they write best-selling books, their life doesn't mean anything, our nation falls apart.
Yeah.
But because every day they have that sense of value. So Oral, that was probably one of the most powerful things, that he had. The other thing that Oral had was such a passion for people. We all know about his healing and that he laid hands on nearly 2 million people. That's logistically impossible nowadays. That will never be done. Jesus didn't do it. The Apostle Paul didn't. And this is not just kind of slapping hands on people's head. This is writing cards, reading to them, getting into the weeds, as it were, of their pain and their hurt, and then praying for them. He went through 2 shoulder blades that had to be replaced because of it. Behind that was a passion to see people healed. And he used to say to me, Phil, why don't pastors pray for people? Everybody is a little bit sick. And, I that goes back to a shepherd's heart.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the great things that I learned about Oral. And you know what, Patrick, in his later years, he would admit not everybody got healed. And in fact, a higher percentage of people didn't get healed. But that didn't stop Oral. You know why? He wasn't doing it for the thrill of having a win, a personal victory. He was driven because he didn't want to see people in pain.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Patrick Norris, and I'd like to introduce you to our Red Ink Revival Leadership Platform, where we offer resources and experiential discovery to help you lead with a whole heart, a healthy brain, and a soul on fire. We believe driven people ought to know what they're driven by. Odds are you're already a high achiever and a visionary. But what are you driven by? What are your teammates driven by? What is your organization driven by? If you've ever struggled to figure you out, to know what winds you up or shuts you down, if you've ever been mystified by teammates who are stuck in old patterns of thinking, control, codependence, risk-averse, grandiosity, and more, or if you have strived to change the culture of your organization, but somehow the opposing current has just been too strong, now more than ever, understanding the drivers behind your life really matters. Your leadership journey to wholeheartedness begins with our flagship free webinar, Driven People, Driven Leaders. This hour-long training is with inspiring and fresh insights from neuroscience, psychology, and theology to help you grow in wholeheartedness in every sphere of life. Go to redinkrrevival.com today and find out more. For all my pastor friends, how would you like to co-host a Driven People, Driven Leaders webinar with me? If you want to invest in other pastor friends, inviting a group of your colleagues and networks, we'd love to set that up with you. All you have to do is get 5 to 10 or more senior pastors rallied to jump on with you, and we'll create a private showing just for your tribe. And it's free. Go to redinkrrevival.com/pastors to check it all out. While you're there, sign up for our e-newsletter that'll hit your inbox the first of each month with a powerful blog post, and then subscribe to our weekly podcast at redinkrrevival.com. You know, I got to go to his house in Newport before he passed, spent a couple hours with a small handful of other pastors and their spouses. And what struck me about him, up close, interacting with his heart and soul, was how he was able to be such a brilliant person. He's still at the older age, filling the room with this presence, just powerful, powerful personality. And he is this big, huge figure, yet when we talked, and I'm asking him questions, I asked him a question about, you know, how did you handle the emotional side of after you laid hands on somebody and they didn't get healed? You know, it's, you know, when you've got the masses, I'm sure that there's times you can get, you know, a little emotionally insensitive, just, you know, you just routine. But if you have a child there and you laid hands on them and they didn't get healed, they died, and the pain in the family. And I said, so how did you manage that? And I was blown away, not even by the verbiage he used, but by the attitude and energy in his heart of simplicity. He said, the fact is, Jesus is the one that told me to lay hands on the sick. And so I gave my life to doing that. I don't have the capacity to know why people don't get healed. I don't know. But I do know that it is my responsibility to lay hands on them and let God do everything that I have the ability to give room for. And I was just blown away. And what really helped me in that time was not only that simplicity of just simple obedience to God without having to figure out all the scientific background of happenings, but he went around the room at the very beginning and he asked how everybody knew about him. So there's 10 people in there. He goes around the room asking everybody, how did you know about Oral Roberts? And I'm telling you, it was mind-blowing how many of them, their grandparents were just they were at death's door. Medical science had nothing more for them. And they went to an Oral Roberts healing meeting, and the grandparents were healed. And because of that, the children, and then the grandchildren who are middle-aged, they're all in the full-time ministry. And these are the stories that you don't hear when you're having 60 Minutes or one of these documentary shows that are trying to expose a healing minister, which I get. You know, there's questions, there's things around so many figures that there's no way to answer them all. But when you hear stories after story after story of families that have been radically impacted in their heritage, in their lineage, because Oral Roberts was faithful, just absolutely amazing. I love you telling the story too, that Oral built his ministry, the university, he built it with this beauty and architecture because he felt like God wanted to make a shift in the mind of people in Christianity, because they always were more poor-minded. They often expected everything had to be B-team level construction. And then Oral comes along and he blows it up. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Sure. I think, I wanted to just backtrack on something that you triggered that was very important. And this is, I think, important in the line of work that you're doing and that I'm trying to do with pastors, and that is that if you take failure personal, you'll take the success personal.
Whew, come on.
Part of what Oral was, he was not afraid to fail at trying to help people. And when there was failure, he didn't take it personal. That's why he kept doing it. Most people that start out in any healing ministry or any other ministry, when they fail, they take it personal and then quit. And that's a crucial time to say, did God tell you to do it? Yes. Are you doing what God told you to do? Yes. Then just stay there, stay in that lane and be faithful. Because if you take the failure personal, you'll take the success personal.
Interesting.
And that's a very important thing that Oral, as far as Oral's desire for excellence, he definitely took, especially what I would call the charismatic Pentecostal gifts of the Spirit culture into a whole nother level. Because even my father, who believed in the gifts of the Spirit and all these things, we were never asked to pray at the Chamber of Commerce, the City Hall meetings. We're on the other side of the fence. And Oral brought education and medicine and combined them together with excellence. And here's a 17-year-old boy who is dying of TB, driven to a tent revival, which, by the way, the man that prayed for him only prayed 7 words over him. And his name was Munsey, of all things.
Oh, my goodness. I didn't know that.
So we used to go. It was a Munsey that prayed for him to get healed. It was a Munsey for him that walked him out of this life into his new. I did a little research to see that he was a relative, and I got pretty close to seeing he wasn't, and stopped. Because I wanted to leave the mystery that maybe we were.
I love
it. But certainly he had an excellence. And this is another thing, Patrick, about what you're doing that I often think of our conversation that made me since a fan of what you're doing. Because Oral believed in medicine. He believed that the study of the mind and of the body, and that everything that God had provided, even the medicine, came originally from nature. And that the more we understood about the mind and the wholeness, he was all about wholeness. And so many, Patrick, of our leaders are trying to get help without the right information and without getting to the right source. I mean, I know pastors that are fasting and praying to break addictions, that if they could get a 5-minute conversation with you, they could unlock some things that could help them so much. And this is what Oral was passionate about, because he saw people sick, and yes, he would lay hands on them, but he also knew that there was another way of laying on of hands. Nurses, doctors, x-rays, surgery, all of these were all part of the gifts of healing that God had brought. And so, Patrick, that's why my heart is for you, because I talk to pastors and I see them, I'm on a 13-day fast trying to break this addiction. And I'm like, look, that's not going to help you.
Yeah.
In fact, so much, even fasting and prayer, Patrick, is driven by works. It's driven by,
so true.
If I do this, God will feel sorry for me. I'll earn the right for him to help me. And that in itself is a virus.
Yeah.
That in itself is attached to the problem. And if God would answer their fasting and prayer, he would be facilitating everything that got them in trouble.
If fasting and prayer would fix whatever the addictive or compulsive behaviors are, the personality disorders that are taking place, and I'm speaking personality disorders in a generality, but any inordinate behaviors that are going on, if fasting was the primary role of doing that, I wonder, could we ever ask somebody to fast so that they could emerge in 14 days having a body that looks like a bodybuilder, that the muscles are now blown up and they are able to flex and create awe and ooh. Well, if you can't do that without exercising the body, a 14-day fast is not going to make your body become this extraordinary machine. Why would we think our brain, for which all of these behaviors are being triggered by, if we thought that our brain could actually get fixed through a 14-day fast, then we should believe that our bodies could become bodybuilder bodies simply by going into deep prayer and fasting. But it can't. There's a science behind it. There's a cause and effect. And yes, even the madman of Gadara, who had the legion of devils cast out of him, when Jesus was done with him, it says that he was in his right mind. So there was a definite traumatic healing from trauma that happened in him. But are we to believe that from that time forward, he didn't deal with fallen humanity? He didn't deal with any human constructs or neurocircuitry that still was imperfect and flawed? Well, the point of all that is just like you said, which you and I both, we can get real passionate on the soapbox, because within the religious circles, people think if I just prayed more, if I just fasted more, if I read my Bible more. But if you're fasting, praying, and reading your Bible with the end goal of trying to get God to do something, it's pure performance, it's meriting, it's works. But if you are doing it for the simple goal of intimacy, where the goal is just to be known, to be felt, to be seen without criticism or judgment, and then go to the deepest regions of your griefs and losses, letting this Jesus meet you in that space, all of a sudden the brain will begin to reprocess and wholeness can happen. But it's also going to need to come with certain handles, certain processing that most people have never been trained in. So I just, you and I, we love that whole idea. Is there any stories that you want to tell about with Joel Osteen or Robert Schuler or anybody else? Joel, let's talk about him just for a minute, because he is a figure that when you're close to him, you love him with a unique love. I wouldn't say that I'm, close, but I actually been around him, been in his home. You've hosted me in some scenarios with him, and I come away from him thinking, this is just one of the nicest human beings that's ever walked the planet. There's no guile in him. There's no hidden agendas. He's just one of the kindest people that you would ever meet. And when I see what he does and how easy, his heart is so tender that you just talk to him a little bit about somebody who came to faith in Christ and he starts crying. And it's so deep and genuine. What's some things that you have kind of taken away? In fact, you tell a story. I'm teeing this up for you. You tell a story of one time he was on the Larry King show, and this innocence that he comes off the show with, where he has just finished an interview and he is coming off the actual show, and he says, I did a good job, didn't I? It's just like just kind of like the innocence of a child. And yet that positivity is really the brand that he has. One time I was getting a picture with him on a stage, and I asked him, I said, hey, Joel, man, thank you for doing this. I know you've been crazy busy. Then you got all these different Nights of Hope and things around the country you're doing. And I said, I know that it's been crazy busy. And he wouldn't like engage the negativity that I was leading him towards. And he wasn't ugly, he wasn't unkind, he just was deflecting it. And I'm like, and at the time I'm thinking, well, I guess I'm not saying it clear enough. So I leaned in a little further and was trying to make my point. And he completely pivoted off of it, because he wasn't going to open himself to negativity. And he says he wakes up every morning, and the first thing he does is goes through a laundry list of gratitude, things he's thankful for. Very first thing, which neurobiologically, this is neuroscience. Neuroscience, what that is the anterior cingulate cortex releasing oxytocin in gratitude, empathy, and compassion. And then it calms down the amygdala's fight, flight, freeze circuits, moving to the nucleus accumbens, which is the pleasure centers of the brain. That's why he's such a happy guy.
Well, who'd have known?
Who'd have known?
I love it. When you were talking, it reminded me of the little boy said to his dad, I said, "Dad, why is my apple turning brown?" And his dad said, "Well, son, when you broke open the skin, the air hit the apple, and it began to oxidize and change the molecule structure into brown." And a few moments passed. "Dad, are you talking to me?"
That's
My
funny.
kids used to always say, "Dad, you're answering questions nobody's asking." But I love that because it's very true. And actually, the more we can understand, I like to put the flip on and flip the switch for electricity, but it sure helps to know what's actually going on.
Yeah.
And that's why I love work. But let me say this about Joe. 2 or 3 things that I think are crucial about Joe. The most important one is his ability to stay in his own lane and to know who he is and who he's not.
Yeah.
That to me has been the most crucial. He says no better than anyone I know. He knows what he's good at and he knows what he's not. And to me, that may be the most important. And when you talk about the work that you do, about what's driving you, if you're insecure, if you've got a point to prove, if you need everybody to tell you that they love you and they're for you, and you've got to be the one that stands out in the room when you walk in, you won't be able to carry the kind of influence that Joel has, because Joel has a very limited focus lane, and from that, and then he has a pure heart. You talk about integrity. To me, integrity is when what you say and what you feel and what you do are the same.
Yeah.
So I say what I mean what I say, and I do what I say I mean. And when those 3 things are lined up, your integrity is engaged, and you're walking it out. And Joel has that. And that, just to go back to that story, he'd been on Larry King one time, and Larry King asked him a pretty tough question. There was 2 dynamics I learned from that one. He was leading up to get on national television and tell everybody that if they're not a Christian, they're going to go to hell. Well, he had enough instinct, though not theologically prepared, to stay away from that. And, that's an interesting thing, Patrick, because Jesus didn't answer every question. And in fact, they accused him of looking like a dumb sheep before the slaughter.
Ooh,
you know what that was?
Come on.
That was a secure man who knew it would be better to not answer the question. And that takes a lot of security. And I tell a lot of pastors, when they say, I want to be on TV and I want to do like what Joe does. I said, if you're not willing to look like a dumb sheep before the slaughter, then don't get in front of that camera.
Yeah.
Because there are entrapments that will seduce your ego to a place that will taint your ability to have a positive message. So he went on, they asked him questions, and he said, I don't know. And I know. Well, Christians were like, oh, what do you mean you don't know? What is it? The world opened up to him because they saw a pure heart. One of the things TED Talks tells us is, don't come across as if you know more than your audience.
Yeah.
And his humility has opened him up to the world. Secondly, when we went back to Larry King and he kind of clarified some things that people took in, beating, he got in the car and said, I did pretty good. And I said, yeah, you did. And then that night I thought, I'd never heard a preacher say, I did pretty good.
See, isn't
and
that
come
amazing?
across so humble.
Yeah.
And as I thought about it, I felt like God was saying to me, Phil, you're a hypocrite in your view of yourself. You say so many nice things about other people, but you're so mean to yourself. So one of them is a lie. Either you're lying to people or you're lying to yourself. You can't have 2 sets of lenses.
Wow.
That's when I needed to have integrity in my own view of myself. And if I can't say I did pretty good, not bragging, but just knowing, hey, I did my best and I stayed in my lane, then how can I mean anything? Believing in others is more believable if I believe in myself.
Yes, absolutely.
And this is the core of your ministry, trying to bring people to a place of wholeness.
Yeah.
That if in the darkness, in the very dark corners of your mind, you can't find a place of peace, if you can't find what's driving you, or if what's driving you is dark, you're going to go to a dark place. Patrick, Jesus said it this way. It's not as scientific as you, but you explained it better. He said, the secrets of a man's heart will be shouted on the rooftop.
Yeah.
That wasn't Jesus saying, I'm a tattletale. He was saying, whatever's down deep, dark in your heart, is going to make its way out. And usually at a time when you can't afford it.
Yeah.
At a time when you don't need your junk to be exposed.
Wow.
This is why it's important. Get help. There's no shame. If someone tells me I've got a problem with my heart and I need a stent, I need something done. If somebody tells me my appendix have ruptured and I need to, I need a surgery, there's no crime or shame in that. If we need somebody to help get in our head and help us tweak some things that aren't right so we can walk our way out of some dark places.
So good.
No shame in that.
So
That's
good.
why, Patrick, I believe the calling on you is so crucial. I believe you will save not only so many lives, but I'm going to prophesy over you, Patrick. The day's going to come when people are going to say, there will be the children and the grandchildren of leaders you have helped, just like Oral Roberts. And they'll say, oh, Patrick, oh, yeah, he helped my grandfather. He helped my grandmother. He helped change their life. That's what's going to happen, because you are now taking one of the last frontiers of wholeness, and that is helping people understand that the brain is an organ in many ways, like the heart, the kidney, and other areas. And if we can understand and get some help, our life can be so productive, so free. And I got to tell you, I have spent a lot of time in the last 3 or 4 weeks dealing with a lot of pain in pastors. And I could literally fall on the floor and weep for the pain that I'm having to walk pastors through just in the last 72 hours. So I say to you, Patrick, be strong. Go after it. God is preparing you. You're making a way, and you're about to enter into a intersection. And it may feel like you're on a country road right now, just plowing through, trying to get to fulfill your call. But you're about to come into an intersection where the cars are going to be going back and forth. And unless somebody can put up a traffic light, there's going to be a lot of crashes and fatalities. And you're going to be that solution. So, I'm honored to be your guest. I like sharing the stories that I've learned. But the biggest reason I came on today is to tell you, you are ahead of your time. Soon, gradually, then suddenly, from nowhere to now here, you will be in a position to help not hundreds, but thousands. So I'm just so proud of what you're doing, and honored to be a part of it in any way that I can. But as someone who does nothing but work with leaders, I don't pastor like you. I don't have a church. I pastor pastors. That means I'm in their world constantly. And what you're doing outside of what the cross has done is just so vital. I can't express it enough.
I don't know what to say. It just feels like that is such a holy thing. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to move beyond this moment. That's a lot. That's amazing, and accept. I got tears in my eyes. I accept the mission. I'm just honored, and I do want you to know that the things, because you've prophesied over me before, and sometimes when you give people a God, heart, soul word, you can deliver it and not know where it goes from there. But it's been a source of energy for me over and over and over. And so I honor you, and I thank you for loving me and investing your gifts, because you have 44 years worth of God moments that you are allowing me to partake of. And I'm grateful, incredibly grateful. So let's just keep taking steps of faith. I don't know what to say. What do I say? Take steps of faith and just keep believing God.
No, I didn't mean to make it so personal, but I do want to just say to you that I'm thankful for what you're doing. And then just to leaders and those that honor you and I with investing their time by watching this, I just want you to know two things. Number one, you're valuable and you matter. And, it's so important for me. I'm so driven. The real heroes, throughout this COVID-19, we've all looked at our first responders and said what heroes they are. Let me tell you something. Pastors are first responders. And if pastors give up, if pastors walk away, if there are no shepherds in this nation, I can tell you, leaders cannot solve the problems of this nation. They can help organize, they can help make it better, and they can take it somewhere. But at the core of every human heart is the need to have a shepherd and to be a part of a herd. And this is why even Jesus in Revelation was not ashamed to say, the Lamb will shepherd his people. He's both. We are all both a lamb, a sheep that needs a shepherd, and many of us are shepherds to a sheep. Don't get away from that call. Don't get away from that. Don't measure your social media likes, our followers. Don't look at numbers and buildings and budgets. Look at the joy that you got into the ministry in the very beginning. How thrilled you were to preach your first sermon, to pray for your first person. Never let that go away. If you lose your shepherd's heart and try to replace it with corporate culture leadership, I don't care about your numbers. I belong to the largest church in the history of this country. I can promise you, it cannot fulfill the calling that God has given you to be. Can I tell you, I've been around them all. Maybe people that you wish you could change places with. And can I tell you, I wouldn't trade places with one of them. Because I know my call and I know my lane. And I know that, the most important thing I can say to you in my last few words is value. What do you value? Follow value, not vision. And make sure you value you. Make sure that you have a clear sense, like Oral Roberts said, the weight of every man's burden is the same. Whether you're raising up children or raising up a university, you just do what God tells you. It's no big deal. And I tell you, if you'll live that life, you'll not only be happy and joyful, but you will see more fruit come out of your life. And I love you. And thank you for investing your time with Patrick and I. I know your time is valuable, and it's been our joy to be with you. And Patrick, God bless you, man.
I love you, Pastor Phil. Thank you again for being on. I want to do it again.
I'd love
you and I have so much that we could talk about. I know I've got a lot of things I want to strike fire with in your heart, and I just really incredibly honored to get to spend this time together. Thanks for being on Red Ink Revival's Leadership Podcast. We love you.
God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. You might be wondering what's next. Consider jumping on one of our free webinars called Driven People, Driven Leaders. These hour-long trainings are with inspiring and fresh insights from neuroscience, psychology, and theology to help you grow in wholeheartedness in every sphere of life. Our next free webinar is scheduled for Friday, June 12th at 10 a.m. Central Time. Go to redinkrevival.com today and find the Register Now tab to save your spot. For all my pastor friends, how would you like to co-host a Driven People, Driven Leaders webinar with me? If you want to invest in other pastor friends, inviting a group of your colleagues and networks, we'd love to set that up with you. All you have to do is get 5 to 10 or more of your senior pastor friends rallied to jump on with you, and we'll create a private showing just for your tribe. And it's free. Go to redinkrevival.com/pastors to check it all out. Also, when you are at the website, sign up for our e-newsletter that'll hit your inbox the first of each month with a powerful blog post, and subscribe to our weekly podcast so you never miss an episode. RedInkRevival.com. Well, everything that we are building is to resource you to be a wholehearted leader. I'd love for you to be a part of our tribe. Can't wait till our next episode, and I'm glad you were with us today. We'll see you next time.